Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for being here. I want to start just with the timetable for all of these negotiations. I know the Republican conference met this morning. What can you tell us just about sort of where things stand? We've heard Memorial Day, July 4th. Realistically, when is all this going to come together?
Well, I don't think anybody anticipated we could move this quickly. And in the history of reconciliation, which is a budget tool that came out of the 1974 Budget Act, we've never moved at this clip. And we've hit every milestone in the time frame that we've set because we know how important it is to give the president all the tools that he needs, whether it's on the security side or to move this economy off high center and really start to grow again. There's no reason to believe at this point we're going to miss the last hurdle to get it to the Senate and then on to the president's desk. Our time frame has been by Memorial Day. Obviously, the Senate is somewhat delayed. We're driving it. We have driven it from the beginning. When I say we, the House.
The House, yeah.
Because I think the Senate, number one, was probably distracted with Senate confirmation hearings. We've been planning for this moment for months. And so it's paying off. We're moving, I think, with unprecedented speed. We're all unified. We know there's tension between various groups within the conferences, and that's understandable, but we've got to meet these budget targets that we set in the House. We've got to have the House framework drive it because it's the only fiscally responsible set of budget targets among the two chambers where whatever we do on tax and whatever investments we make in security, it's going to be offset by growth and spending reductions. That has been set in stone, and the commitment is there to enforce that. The Senate is sort of wide open, and that's the scary piece for budget hawks like
Well,
me.
let me ask you about that because it's a wide chasm between $1.5 trillion and $3 trillion. What are your conversations like with your Senate counterpart, with the senior senator from South Carolina? How optimistic are you that this isn't going to maybe get through the House and then get jammed up in the Senate?
Well, I think the Senate is going to take our lead. Now, you said $3 trillion, but let's put it in perspective. The only enforceable spending cuts in the Senate bill is $4 billion, not trillion. Our budget target is $1.5 trillion with a goal of $2 trillion for a full offset deficit neutral proposition. But $4 billion in the Senate, if you annualize that, that's on a 10-year budget window. If you annualize that at $400 million, their spending cuts are less than 2 hours worth of borrowing. We're borrowing over $250 million an hour, $6 billion a day. So that's just not going to cut it if we're trying to restore the fiscal health of the country and keep us from, falling over the precipice into a sovereign debt crisis. So again, we'll drive it. Our framework has to stay intact if it's going to be done responsibly. And if we're not going to have all this lead in our saddle from an economic perspective of deficits that will make it difficult to bring down prices, that will rob private capital that we desperately need to be invested for growth and job creation. So I think deficit reduction and doing this in a fiscally responsible way that starts to bend the curve on debt to GDP is the most pro-growth approach to reconciliation.
I don't want to go into too many hypotheticals here, but if you get a reconciliation bill that doesn't make significant cuts to the deficit, I think of you as such a proud deficit hawk. Yeah. Is that something you would sign, that you would support rather?
Well, let me put it this way, and I'll answer that directly, but let me put it this way. If we just cut taxes for ourselves and our constituents for today, but we don't offset the impact to the deficit or the cost of tax cuts, there is a net effect of growth, which brings down the cost, but there is a cost, and in this case, it will be trillions of dollars. If we cut taxes without reducing spending and offsetting the impact on the deficit, we're not cutting taxes. We're merely shifting the tax burden onto future generations. And I didn't come up here to increase what is already a $36 trillion tax burden for my children and a $2 trillion annual deficit that will double over the next 10 years as more tax burden on my kids. And however that ends, whether it's a sovereign debt crisis and it's a cliff effect like Greece, or if it's a slow burn, or we inflate our way out of it, Either way, it's disastrous. It's a disastrous economy. It's a horrible future to consign our kids to. So we don't need to walk away as Republicans having the deficit gone up on our watch. And again, it will have countervailing forces to growth. It's immoral to continue to dig a deeper hole for our children to have to climb out of. So the commitment is not just there by me as the budget chairman. I think you've got a sizable number of deficit hawks who understand the historic opportunity and the prospects of very, very dangerous implications if we don't course correct.
So I look at your conference, and there are these kind of pay-for hardliners like Chip Roy, another gentleman from Texas. How confident are you that you're going to have some unanimity among you? Are you, maybe describe how monumental the task is of getting everybody on board with this? Then how are you going to do it? And is the president, has he volunteered to help do that?
Well, we set budget targets for the 11 committees that are involved in this on the spending side, or what will cost us on border security, defense, and tax, and on the savings side per committee. And we were able to thread the needle with a 1-vote margin and pass it because everybody was linked. Everybody's interest was linked. Everybody was motivated to lean in so that we could have the fullness of the tax policies that would generate the biggest economic return, because we know we need all the help we can get. And so I think that tying all of it together was the key. And the commitment has been there. The progress is being made by each committee in a way that gives me confidence we're going to meet those targets. But then the question will be, when we send it to the Senate, will it come back intact? Will the integrity of that framework be intact? That's a bigger question. But in terms of whether the House will get there, I still think there will be debate, even if we meet the targets. Did we do enough on entitlement reform? Did we do enough to send the signal to the bond markets, who are concerned that nobody in Washington is going after the debt drivers, which is mandatory spending? Will we do enough where they will say, you know what, we have more confidence that our best days are ahead of us, and we start seeing not only the debt come down, but the interest on the debt and the premium we're paying on behalf of, because of the risks, because of the increased risks. And we're paying $1 trillion just to service the debt, which is more than we spend on all of defense, more than we spend in Medicare benefits. So it's a huge problem, and it's a huge moment to address that problem and not just cut taxes and increase defense spending. That Republicans do that in their sleep. This moment calls for us to do so much more, because that business as usual approach has left us with this mountain of World War levels of debt and deficits. And it's going to require unprecedented strength, courage of conviction, and political will to take it head on. And I can't think of a better president to do that than President Trump. And I feel like we're making enough momentum in the House that it will loop back around to us in a way that we can feel confident that we've done this.
A couple questions to end, one having to do with Medicaid, and Democrats are talking a lot about cuts to Medicaid, and you've said cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you willing to go beyond that? Are there any things that you see as strictly off limit in these conversations?
Well, at the end of the day, it will be, what can we get the magic number, sort of the 218 less the number of members who aren't here anymore. So we have to get the number to pass it out of the House. My appetite for reforms and deeper reforms is greater than some of the members in my conference, and we have to respect each other and work to find that happy medium. But I would tell you, having Medicaid money being spent on people who are here in this country illegally is unacceptable. Medicaid has grown by 50% over the last 4 or 5 years. It'll grow by another 50%. The program's not sustainable as a safety net to our most vulnerable Americans. I don't think there's a Republican, one, who doesn't want to preserve the program and to protect the future benefit for Americans who will need it. But it was designed for pregnant, disabled, the poorest and sickest among us. But when Obamacare was expanded by the Democrats, they expanded it to able-bodied adults. And then they put a subsidy that was significantly bigger than around the traditional Medicare, the most vulnerable. Well, what happened as a result? The whole healthcare system in the United States oriented around providing care in greater measure to the able-bodied adults at the expense of the most vulnerable. That's unacceptable. I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of the safety net for vulnerable. That's just one example, but there's monies being siphoned off by states and local stakeholders that have nothing to do with providing the service to the beneficiary. This is the largest means-tested welfare program among almost 100 with a total cost of $1.6 trillion. That's the welfare system from the federal government in this great country. Well, this is the largest, and it doesn't have a straightforward, common sense work requirement for able-bodied adults, like TANF does, like supplemental nutrition does. If you do that, you prevent people from being trapped in dependence on the government, and you save $150 billion that could go to help keeping taxes down for every American. So I see this, one last example, just to show you how fraught with waste and fraud this program is. It's a horribly run program. And it does a disservice to ensuring and providing confidence to the beneficiary that it will be there in the future. One great example, and case in point, if you took the program today and you took the money we pay out per head in the program, per beneficiary, and you gave it to the states and then indexed it to inflation, medical inflation, which is more aggressive than CPI or other indexes, you would save $1 trillion, just like that. One reform, because we waste so much of the money and we structure the program, we allow fraud, all the ways I just described, and if you gave it to the states to run, not only would you right-size federalism in this country and have 50 laboratories of innovation from which to derive best practices, you would actually save a boatload of money to make sure that we don't bankrupt the country and, and have our kids suffer as a result.
Very quickly here, we heard the Treasury Secretary talk about the X date. What is your sense of when that is, and how does that variable fit into all of this?
Well, I think it's an action-forcing thing that we have to consider. I don't think anybody would ever anticipate, nor has it happened, that we won't protect the good faith and credit of the United States and pay our bills. I do think the debt limit is there at a minimum as a flashing yellow light, if not a flashing red light, when you have this kind of debt and deficits and this rapid of a fiscal decline for this country. So I think we have to do the right thing, pay our bills, pay our creditors, pay our debts, but you also have to make the adjustments or the fiscal reforms and the spending constraints so that you are turning the battleship that's going to sink because we're loaded up with too much debt. You got to do them in tandem. But we're doing enough on the fiscal reform side. In the House framework, I can tell you confidently, to bring the debt to GDP down as a whole, that we should be able to give the president as much runway as he wants because we're doing the right and responsible thing. It's when we just pay the bills, raise the debt limit, and we don't do anything to rein in the spending that's driving the debt or any sort of fiscal reform. That is reckless. That is irresponsible. And we didn't do that with President Biden when we negotiated with him, and we shouldn't do that in this case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.